The surgical lights burned white hot above Emily Mitchell's face as Dr. James Cooper made the first incision into her right cheek, 22 years old, and the mass protruding from her face had finally brought her here to this sterile room that smelled of antiseptic and fear. Nurse Rebecca Stevens positioned the suction tube, expecting routine dermoid cyst removal, 5 years of growth, parents who said it was harmless, a girl who'd hidden in shadows while her face transformed into something unrecognizable. The scalpel cut deeper, tissue parted, and then something glinted in the surgical field. Dr. Cooper's hands froze. Rebecca leaned closer, her breath catching. Metal, inside facial tissue, where no metal should exist. The forceps closed around the object, slowly, impossibly. A small silver ring emerged from Emily's cheek, glistening with fluid and tissue. Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth. Someone gasped. But this story begins 5 years earlier, when a scared 17-year-old first noticed a tiny bump she'd learned to hate. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from it now. Let's continue with the story. Willow Creek, Iowa wasn't the kind of place where secrets stayed buried long. Population 3,200, where the grain elevator dominated the skyline and everyone knew your business before you did. Main Street stretched 6 blocks, Miller's Diner on one end, Henderson's Pharmacy on the other, with the white-steepled Baptist church standing guard in between. The Mitchell family lived in a modest 2-bedroom house on Maple Street, where the paint peeled in strips and the porch steps creaked warnings before visitors arrived. Autumn had painted the surrounding farmland in golds and browns. Harvest season bringing both plenty and exhaustion to farming families who'd worked this land for generations. Emily Mitchell was 17 that fall, a high school senior with auburn hair that caught fire in sunlight and green eyes that still held optimism. She carried a 3.8 GPA, served as captain of the varsity volleyball team, and spent Sunday evenings at youth group, where she taught younger kids Bible stories with genuine enthusiasm. Her acceptance letter to nursing school sat framed on her dresser, a future she'd worked toward since freshman year. She was closest to her grandmother, Dorothy Hayes, a 72-year-old widow who lived at Meadowbrook Senior Community on the edge of town. Dorothy had raised Margaret alone after her husband died young, and that strength had passed down through generations. Every Sunday after church, Emily visited with fresh-baked cookies and stories about school, volleyball, and her not-so-secret crush on David Walsh. Robert Mitchell, Emily's father, worked the line at Heartland Grain Processing, where he'd spent 23 years breathing dust and earning modest wages. At 48, his hands were permanently rough, his back chronically sore, but he'd never missed a day. He spoke rarely, believed deeply in providing for family, and carried shadows in his eyes that Emily had never understood. Her mother, Margaret Mitchell, worked part-time at Henderson's Pharmacy, stocking shelves and running the register. At 46, anxiety had carved permanent lines around her mouth. She'd lost her sister Linda at 19, a routine surgery gone catastrophically wrong, and the trauma had never released its grip. Medical procedures terrified her. Hospitals felt like death chambers. Even minor illnesses sent her spiraling into worst-case scenarios. It was late September when Emily first noticed the bump after volleyball practice, a pea-sized swelling on her right cheek, just below the bone. She'd pressed it experimentally, felt a fullness beneath the skin, and dismissed it as a bruise from an errant ball. 17-year-olds healed quickly, Everything healed quickly when you were young. She had no way of knowing that tiny bump would grow into something that would consume her life, destroy her confidence, and eventually bring an entire community together in ways she couldn't imagine. No way of knowing it carried a secret that defied medical explanation, a mystery that had waited 22 years to be discovered. 3 weeks passed before Emily mentioned the bump to her mother. It hadn't disappeared like she'd expected. Instead, it had grown from pea-sized to grape-sized, a firm mass beneath her skin that she could feel when she chewed. She found Margaret folding laundry in the cramped bedroom her parents shared, the autumn sun streaming through thin curtains that had hung there since Emily was born. "Mama, can you look at something?" Margaret turned, dish towel in hand, and Emily pulled her hair back to reveal the right side of her face. The bump protruded noticeably now, distorting the smooth line of her cheek. The color drained from Margaret's face. Her hands trembled, dropping the towel. For a moment, she simply stared, and Emily watched something like terror flash across her mother's features. "It's nothing, honey." Margaret's voice came out too quickly, too high. "Just a cyst." A sebaceous cyst. They're very common in teenagers. "But it's getting bigger." "It'll go away on its own. These things always do." Margaret picked up the towel, folded it with methodical precision. "Apply warm compresses 3 times a day. It'll drain naturally." Emily wanted to push, to ask if they should see a doctor, but something in her mother's rigid posture stopped her. Margaret had always been anxious about medical issues. Better not to worry her further. For 2 more weeks, Emily followed instructions. Warm washcloths pressed against her cheek until the skin turned pink. Nothing changed. The bump continued its steady expansion. Robert noticed at Sunday dinner, his fork pausing halfway to his mouth as Emily turned her head. His eyes languored on her cheek, concern creasing his weathered face. But he said nothing. That night, after Emily had gone to bed, she heard voices through the thin walls. "Maggie, we need to take her to a doctor." Her father's voice, unusually firm. "No." Her mother's response was immediate, sharp. "Absolutely not. It's growing. You can see it's growing." "I won't put her through what Linda went through." Margaret's voice cracked. "The doctors killed my sister. Routine surgery. They said, simple procedure. She never woke up. Robert, 19 years old, and she never woke up. This is different. They always say it's different. They always say it's safe, and then they wheel them away, and sometimes they don't come back." Silence followed. Emily pressed her ear against the cool wall, heart pounding. "She could die. Maggie," Robert's voice was barely audible now, "she could die in surgery." Margaret was crying. "I can't lose her like I lost Linda. I can't." "Please, don't make me." Emily heard her father's heavy footsteps retreat. No more argument. Her mother's quiet sobbing continued for another hour. The next Sunday, Dorothy pulled Emily aside on her small balcony overlooking the senior community's courtyard. Autumn wind scattered leaves below them, and Dorothy's thin hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had gone cold. "Let me see it." "John." Emily pushed her hair back. The bump had reached walnut size, impossible to hide without effort. Dorothy's fingers touched the swelling with surprising gentleness. Her aged face thoughtful. "You carry the family blessing on your face. Grandma, it's just a cyst. Mama says, your mama's scared. Fear makes people do strange things. Say stranger things." Dorothy set down her teacup, reached for an old photo album on the side table. She flipped through pages until she found what she wanted, a picture from 1970. A young Dorothy, maybe 20 years old, smiling at the camera. On her left hand, clearly visible, was a delicate silver ring. This ring belonged to my grandmother. 4 generations of women wore it. Dorothy's voice grew distant. I lost it the night your mama was born. Home birth, complications, everything went sideways. When I finally came to, the ring was gone. Searched everywhere, never found it. Emily studied the photograph, not understanding why her grandmother was telling her this now. Strange things happen in our family, Emily, medical mysteries, things doctors can't explain. Dorothy closed the album. When the time comes, remember, this truth sets you free. Don't let fear choose your path. The cryptic words unsettled Emily, but she hugged her grandmother and promised to visit again next week. At school, self-consciousness crept in like a slow rising tide. Emily started wearing her hair down constantly, letting auburn waves curtain the right side of her face. During volleyball practice, she angled herself away from her teammates. When Sarah Parker asked about it, Emily laughed it off. Just a weird cyst. Going away soon? But it wasn't going away. 3 months after she'd first noticed it, the bump had grown to the size of a golf ball, and Emily had stopped looking in mirrors. 6 months crawled by with agonizing slowness. The bump that Emily's parents had promised would disappear had transformed into something she could no longer pretend didn't exist. Golf ball became tennis ball. Her right cheek protruded grotesquely, distorting her face into something she barely recognized in reflections she tried desperately to avoid. Pain arrived as an unwelcome companion, a dull ache that pulsed with her heartbeat, occasionally sharpening into stabbing sensations that made her gasp. Eating became an ordeal. She could only chew on the left side, and even soft foods required effort. 15 pounds melted from her frame over 2 months, leaving her clothes hanging loose. Margaret watched her daughter waste away and clung harder to denial. It's getting smaller, honey. I can see improvement. But her eyes betrayed her, red-rimmed and haunted. Avoiding direct contact with Emily's face, Robert said nothing, but his absence spoke volumes. He'd taken on extra shifts at the grain factory, then started a second job as a night janitor at County Hospital. Weekends found him driving for a local car service, his truck navigating dark country roads while his family slept. He came home exhausted, smelling of industrial cleaner and diesel fuel, and ate his reheated dinners in silence. What his family didn't know was that Robert had opened a secret savings account at First National Bank. Every extra dollar went into it. The account label read simply, Emily's Future Fund. Current balance, after 6 months of killing himself, $4.2, not nearly enough. But he kept working, kept saving, kept hoping. Emily graduated high school in May wearing a surgical mask she claimed was for allergies. The ceremony photographer offered to wait while she removed it. She declined. Her acceptance to nursing school at Iowa State arrived with a scholarship offer. She deferred admission for 1 year, citing family health concerns in her email. The admissions office sent sympathetic regards. Sarah Parker's phone calls became less frequent, then stopped altogether. When they passed in the grocery store, Sarah's eyes slid away. Her greeting forced, Sorry, Em, I'm just really busy with college prep. The friendship that had survived 13 years couldn't survive visible difference. Only David Walsh remained constant. Every Sunday after church, he appeared on the Mitchells' porch with something small, a book he thought she'd like, wildflowers from his mother's garden, a bag of the caramel corn she loved from the county fair. Emily answered the door less and less, until Margaret started making excuses. "She's sleeping. She's not feeling well. Maybe next time. David." But David kept coming, kept leaving small gifts on the porch railing, kept believing in a girl who'd stopped believing in herself. By month 12, Emily rarely left her bedroom. The mass had grown to the size of a small orange, pushing her right eye slightly upward, pulling her mouth into a permanent asymmetric expression. New symptoms emerged that terrified her in ways the appearance never had. Her right eyelid didn't close completely when she blinked. Numbness spread across her cheek. Occasionally, her speech slurred as if she'd been drinking. She spent hours in the dark, curtains drawn, scrolling through her phone at photos of her former self. The smiling volleyball captain seemed like a different person, someone who'd lived in a different lifetime. Sometimes she'd type searches into her browser. "Facial mass won't go away." "Large cheek tumor. When to see doctor?" Then she'd delete her search history, guilt and fear warring in her chest. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in October, 13 months after she had first noticed the bump. Dr. James Cooper, a 55-year-old surgeon with kind eyes and steady hands, came into Henderson's pharmacy to pick up his wife's prescription. Margaret was working the register. As she processed his order, Dr. Cooper's professional eye caught sight of a framed photograph beside the register, Emily's senior portrait from the year before. "Your daughter?" he asked pleasantly. "Yes, Emily." Margaret's voice carried the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights. "Beautiful girl. Is she in college now?" Margaret's hands trembled as she bagged his prescription. "She's taking a year off. Health issues." Something in her tone made Doc Cooper look up sharply. He'd known Margaret Mitchell for years, had watched her panic over minor ailments, understood her medical anxiety stemmed from her sister's death. "Margaret, is everything all right?" The question, asked with genuine concern, broke something inside her. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "There's a mass on her face. It's been growing for over a year. I thought I told her it would go away, but it's not going away. And I don't know what to do, and I'm so scared." Dr. Cooper came around the counter, guided her to a chair in the back room. "How large is it now?" "I don't know. Big." "She won't let me see it anymore. She stays in her room with the lights off." "Margaret." Dr. Cooper's voice was gentle but firm. "You need to bring her in today, this afternoon if possible." "But what if something happens? What if it's like Linda?" "I remember your sister. I was a resident when she came in. But Margaret, that was nearly 30 years ago. Anesthesia protocols have changed. Monitoring has changed. Everything has changed." He pulled a business card from his wallet, wrote his personal cell number on the back. "I'll see Emily myself. Free consultation, no commitment. But she needs to be evaluated immediately." And Margaret took the card with shaking hands, stared at it like it might bite her. That evening, she showed it to Robert. They sat at their kitchen table, the card between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. "It's time, Maggie," Robert said quietly. past time. Margaret closed her eyes, nodded, surrendered to the inevitable. Emily sat on her bed in the darkness, the shape of her parents visible in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light. She hadn't invited them in. They came anyway, sitting on either side of her like bookends, holding up something fragile and precious. "Baby, we need to talk." Robert's voice was rough with exhaustion and emotion. "I already know what you're going to say." Emily's words came out flat, emotionless. She'd cried herself empty months ago. Margaret reached for her daughter's hand in the darkness. "I've been wrong, so wrong. I let my fear hurt you, and I'll never forgive myself for that." "We're going to the hospital tomorrow." Robert left no room for argument. "Dr. Cooper will see you. He's a good man, a good surgeon." Emily laughed, a bitter sound that didn't match the girl she used to be. "Now, after 13 months of telling me it was nothing, now you want me to see a doctor." "I was scared." Margaret's voice broke. "When I look at you, I see Linda in that hospital bed. I see them telling me she's gone. I can't lose you like that. So instead, you're letting me disappear while I'm still alive." Emily finally turned toward her mother, and even in the darkness, Margaret could see the massive protrusion distorting her daughter's face. "Do you know what it's like to stop existing because people can't stand to look at you?" "We look at you every day," Robert said. "No, you don't. You look away. Everyone does, even me." Emily stood, moved to the window. "I'm 18. I could have gone to the doctor myself, but I trusted you. I believed you when you said it was nothing." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. "I know." Margaret stood, approached her daughter slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. "And I will carry that guilt until the day I die. But please, Emily, please let us try to fix this now." Emily stared out at the dark street, at the normalcy of Willow Creek continuing without her. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, tomorrow." That night, Robert showed Emily the bank statements. 13 months of overtime, second jobs, weekend shifts. $47 to my 13 tithe. "A man provides," he said simply. "That's what a man does." Emily threw her arms around her father and sobbed into his work shirt that smelled like grain dust and desperation. "You've been killing yourself. You're my daughter. I'd die for you if that's what it took." The next morning, County Hospital loomed like a cathedral of steel and glass on the edge of town. Emily wore a scarf wrapped around her face, dark sunglasses, despite the overcast sky. In the passenger seat, she twisted her hands together until the knuckles went white. Dr. Cooper's office was on the 3rd floor. The waiting room was mercifully empty at 9 a.m. on a Wednesday. A nurse called them back almost immediately. The examination room felt too cold, too bright, too real. Dr. Cooper entered with a calm presence that seemed to fill the space. He was older than Emily expected, with gray at his temples and deep smile lines around his eyes. "Emily, I'm Dr. Cooper. Thank you for coming in." He pulled up a stool, sat at her eye level rather than standing over her. "I know this is frightening. Medical settings can be intimidating, especially when we've avoided them for a while. But I promise, today we're just talking and looking. No decisions, no pressure." "All right." Emily unwrapped the scarf with trembling hands. Dr. Cooper's professional mask slipped for just a moment, A flash of concern quickly controlled. The mass was larger than he'd feared from Margaret's description. It protruded a good 3 inches from her face. The skin stretched taut and shiny over it. Her right eye sat slightly higher than the left, the eyelid unable to close completely. The asymmetry was profound. "How long has it been this size?" "About 2 months?" Emily's voice was barely audible. He approached slowly, put on gloves, palpated the mass gently. Emily winced. "Pain when I touch it?" "Yes, and when I eat, and sometimes just randomly." Dr. Cooper examined her eye movement, tested facial sensation with a cotton swab, had her smile and frown. He took measurements, photographs with her written consent, made notes in his tablet. "Emily, I need to be direct with you. This mass requires immediate surgical removal based on its location, size, and your symptoms. I believe it's a dermoid cyst, a benign growth that's been developing for years, possibly since before you were born." "Benign means not cancer?" Emily asked. "Correct, but benign doesn't mean harmless. This growth is pressing on your facial nerve. You're already experiencing partial paralysis. That's why your eye doesn't close properly. If we wait much longer, that damage could become permanent. There's also risk of infection, and it could begin affecting your ability to eat and breathe." Margaret gripped the arms of her chair. "What are the surgical risks?" Dr. Cooper turned to her, understanding in his eyes. "Margaret, I know what'll happen to your sister. I was there. I was a first-year resident, and I watched the attending physicians try everything to save her. It was a tragedy, but I need you to understand, anesthesia protocols have advanced tremendously. We have better monitoring, better drugs, better training. The risk of anesthesia complications now is less than 1%. But it's not zero. Nothing in life is zero risk, but the risk of not operating is 100%. Says Emily will lose function in the right side of her face. The mass will continue growing. Eventually, it will become life-threatening." Robert spoke for the first time. "How soon are we talking?" "I'd like to schedule surgery within 6 weeks, sooner if possible." Emily closed her eyes. 6 weeks? It felt both impossibly soon and unbearably far away. Dr. Cooper pulled up imaging examples on his computer, showed them what dermoid cysts looked like, explained the surgical approach. He'd make an incision along the natural contour of her face, carefully dissect the mass away from surrounding tissue, remove it completely. Recovery would take weeks. There would be scarring, though he'd do his best to minimize it. Possible complications included infection, bleeding, nerve damage, but these were manageable risks. The cost discussion came last. Total expenses, $127,000. Hospital stay, surgery, anesthesia, follow-up care. Robert's face fell despite himself. His savings wouldn't cover half of it. "We have payment plans," Dr. Cooper said gently, "and the hospital has a charity care program that can significantly reduce the cost based on income. We'll work with you." Emily made her decision in that moment. She thought of Dorothy, growing weaker by the day. She thought of David, leaving flowers on her porch every Sunday. She thought of the girl in old photographs who'd believed in a future. "Schedule it," she said. "I don't care about the money. I just want my life back." Dr. Cooper smiled. "That's exactly what we're going to give you." As they walked out of the hospital, Emily pulled out her phone for the first time in months and called Sarah. The conversation was awkward, halting. But Sarah cried when Emily told her about the surgery. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm so sorry, Em." "You can be there now," Emily said. "Next." She texted David, "Thank you for the flowers. All of them." His response came within seconds. "Does this mean I can see you?" "Soon." She typed, "I promise, soon." That afternoon, Pastor Williams visited the Mitchell home. Margaret had called him, voice shaking, asking for prayers. But the pastor came with more than prayers. He came with a proposal. "The church wants to help. We'd like to organize a fundraiser, bake sales, benefit dinners, whatever it takes." Margaret's pride reared up. "We're not charity cases." "No," Pastor Williams agreed. "Your family, and family takes care of family. That's what community means. Margaret, let us love you the way you've loved others all these years." Emily, listening from the stairs, came down. "Yes, we accept. Thank you." The mobilization began that Sunday. Pastor Williams announced Emily's situation during service not with pity, but with a call to action. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The bake sale filled the church fellowship hall with the scent of cinnamon and hope. Long tables overflowed with pies, cookies, brownies, and cakes, 40 families contributing their best recipes and biggest hearts. Sarah's mother organized everything with military precision, price tags on every item, a donation jar prominently displayed at the checkout table. Emily stood in the doorway, scarf still wrapped around her face. Overwhelmed by the crowd, Mrs. Henderson spotted her first, the same woman who'd gossiped about that poor Mitchell girl months earlier. She approached carrying a 7-layer chocolate cake. "Emily, honey, I made your favorite." Mrs. Henderson's eyes were wet. "I'm so sorry I wasn't kinder. I'm so sorry I didn't help sooner." Emily accepted the embrace, felt the woman's genuine remorse, and whispered, "You're helping now." The bake sale raised $200 in one afternoon. When Sarah handed Emily the cash box, both girls cried. "I should have been braver," Sarah said. "I should have been a better friend." "You're here now," Emily replied. "That's what matters." The following week, David's mother, Rachel, created a GoFundMe page. She'd asked Emily's permission first, driving to the Mitchell house with her laptop and a gentle request. "Let people help. Let them be part of your healing." Rachel crafted the description carefully. "Help Emily Mitchell get life-saving surgery." She included childhood photos: Emily at 6 with missing front teeth, Emily at 12 winning the spelling bee, Emily at 16 spiking a volleyball. Radiant and whole, the transformation was heartbreaking. The final photo showed only Emily's eyes above a surgical mask taken at graduation. Within 24 hours, the campaign raised $3,200 from 62 donors. By the end of the week, $9,750 from 342 people, many complete strangers. Emily read the comments through, tears, "Praying for you from Nebraska. My daughter had a facial tumor. She's thriving now. You will too. You're beautiful and brave. From one survivor to another, you've got this." Maggie's Diner, Willow Creek's beloved local restaurant, announced a benefit dinner. All Thursday proceeds would go to Emily's fund. The owner, Tom Briggs, had known Emily since she was small, remembered her studying vocabulary words at the counter while Margaret worked nearby shifts. 200 people showed up. The diner sat 70, lines wrapped around the block. Tom opened his kitchen to volunteers, and they cooked until midnight burgers, chicken fried steak, meatloaf, all the comfort food that defined small-town Iowa. Mrs. Henderson came again, this time with her husband and a $500 check. She found Margaret restocking drinks and pressed the check into her hand. I was cruel. I judged when I should have helped. Please forgive me. Margaret embraced her. Both women crying in the storage room while the dinner crowd buzzed outside. The benefit raised another $8 or $100. Then came the anonymous donation. A cashier's check for $15,000 arrived at the Mitchell house in a plain white envelope with no return address. Just a note card with careful handwriting. Pay it forward. Love multiplies when shared. Robert held the check with shaking hands. Who would do this? They'd never know, not yet, that the donor was connected to a nurse named Rebecca Stevens, and that the gift repaid a kindness Dorothy Hayes had offered 20 years earlier to a desperate family living in their car. Emily's story spread through Willow Creek like wildfire in dry grass. The local newspaper ran a feature. The county radio station mentioned it during morning announcements. People Emily barely remembered approached her family with donations, $10 here, $50 there, each amount given with genuine care. Total raised by the community, $31,850, combined with the Robert savings, $760. Still not enough, but closer, so much closer. Dr. Cooper called Robert directly. I spoke with the hospital board. Given Emily's case and your financial situation, they've approved a 70% charity care discount. Your out-of-pocket will be $38 to $100, and we can arrange a payment plan, $150 monthly for 20 years. No interest. Robert did the math. With the community funds and his savings, they could pay the entire amount up front and have money left over. Real money. Enough to help Emily start college, to fix the roof that had leaked for 3 years, to breathe. Dr. Cooper, I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by bringing Emily in next week for pre-op. We're scheduled for surgery on November 12th. November 12th. 3 weeks away. Emily circled the date on her calendar with a red marker, her hand surprisingly steady. 2 weeks before surgery, Emily made the trip to Meadowbrook Senior Community. Dorothy was fading fast. The hospice nurse had called that morning with a gentle warning. If you want to see her lucid, come today. Dorothy's room smelled like lavender and something else. The indescribable scent of a body shutting down. She lay in bed, oxygen tubes in her nose, skin so thin it seemed translucent. But her eyes were clear when Emily entered. There's my girl. Dorothy's voice was barely a whisper. Emily pulled a chair close, took her grandmother's paper-thin hand. I'm having the surgery. Grandma, 3 weeks from today. Good, that's good, Dorothy smiled. Tell me everything. Don't spare the scary parts. So, Emily did. She told her about the mass, the fear, the isolation, the decision. She told her about the community rallying, about the money raised, about strangers caring when she thought no one did. She told her about being angry at her parents, then understanding them, then forgiving them. I was so mad at Mama, Emily admitted, for lying, for waiting, for being scared. Your mama loves you, but love doesn't mean she was right. Dorothy squeezed Emily's hand with what little strength remained. I need to tell you something. Something I never told Margaret because I didn't want to scare her more. Emily leaned closer. I had the same thing you have, a facial cyst. I was 20 years old, living in rural Iowa with a father who didn't believe women needed doctors. He forbade me from getting surgery, said it was vanity, said God made me that way for a reason. Emily's eyes widened. What did you do? I snuck away, took a bus to Des Moines, found a clinic, had the surgery without telling anyone. My father disowned me for 2 years, but that surgery saved my life. Emily, it let me live fully. I met your grandfather at a recovery support group for people who'd had facial surgeries. We fell in love over our matching scars. Dorothy touched her own face, and Emily could see the faint line she'd never noticed before. It runs in families. Dorothy continued. Genetic predisposition. That's why I wasn't surprised when I saw yours. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Would you have believed me? Or would you have trusted your parents like a good daughter should? Dorothy smiled sadly. Some lessons we have to learn ourselves. She told Emily about the ring, then the family heirloom worn by 4 generations of women lost during Margaret's traumatic home birth in 19th emergency complications. Dorothy unconscious, chaos everywhere. When she'd come to, the ring was gone, searched for months, never found. I always wondered, Dorothy said dreamily, if somehow it stayed with Margaret, inside her somehow. Sounds crazy, I know. Emily didn't understand, but she listened, holding her grandmother's hand. Promise me something, Dorothy said, suddenly urgent despite her weakness. Live your life. Don't let fear win. Forgive your parents. They did their best with broken hearts. And when you survive, because you will, Emily, you absolutely will help others. Turn your pain into purpose. I promise, Grandma. I'm proud of you, braver than I was at your age. Dorothy's eyes drifted closed. See you at Claire's wedding. I'll be there in spirit, if not in body. Both knew she wouldn't make it to December. Emily kissed her grandmother's forehead and left, carrying Dorothy's blessing like a torch in the darkness. The days before surgery blurred together, pre-op appointments with blood draws and echoes and chest x-rays, consultations with the anesthesiologist, a kind woman named Dr. Patricia Grant, who explained every drug, every monitor, every safety protocol, until even Margaret's anxiety eased slightly. Emily met with Dr. Cooper again. He showed her computer simulations of the procedure, walked her through each step. I'll make the incision here, along your natural facial contours. The scar will be noticeable at first, but it'll fade significantly over time. We'll remove the entire mass, send it to pathology, make sure we got clean margins. Will I look normal? Emily asked. You'll look like yourself, different than before, but yourself. Dr. Cooper's honesty was refreshing. There will be a scar. Your face will be swollen for weeks. But Emily, you'll have function back. You'll be able to close your eye, to smile symmetrically, to live without pain. That was enough. That was everything. The night before surgery, Emily couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m., she stood at her bedroom window watching rain begin to fall. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Her mind raced with fears. What if something went wrong? What if she didn't wake up? What if the damage was already permanent? The window ledge called to her not as a serious threat, but as a place to sit with her existential dread. She opened the window, let the rain hit her face, thought about how tired she was, tired of being brave, tired of fighting, tired of hoping. The door opened behind her. Robert stood there in his work clothes, having just returned from his hospital janitorial shift. He'd heard the window open. He didn't speak. Well, just walked over, gently helped her down from the ledge, and sat beside her on the floor, their backs against the bed. They sat in silence for a long time before Robert finally spoke. "I've been a coward." "No, Daddy, let me finish." His voice was rough with emotion. "I worked 3 jobs because it was easier than being here, facing this. Money I could handle. Emotions terrified me." He told her then about Lucas, the brother Emily never knew, stillborn 8 months into pregnancy before she was born. Cord accident, nothing anyone could have prevented. But it had shattered Margaret, had made every moment of Emily's pregnancy a nightmare of terror rather than joy. "That's why your mama is how she is," Robert said. "She's been afraid of losing you since before you were born, and I've been afraid too. When I couldn't protect Lucas, I felt like I'd failed as a father before I even started." Emily finally understood. The overprotectiveness, the denial, the desperate need to believe nothing was wrong, all of it rooted in a tragedy she'd never known existed. "Tomorrow, you're going to be braver than both of us," Robert has said. "You're going to save yourself because we couldn't." Father and daughter held each other and cried until dawn broke over Willow Creek. But the pre-op area at County Hospital felt like a holding cell for the condemned. Cold fluorescent lights, beeping monitors, the antiseptic smell that meant serious things happened here. Emily sat on the gurney in a thin hospital gown, an IV already placed in her left hand, her right side of her face freshly shaved where the incision would be made. Margaret held her right hand, Robert held her left. Both parents looked exhausted, aged 10 years in the past week. The anesthesiologist, DeGrant, arrived at 6:45 a.m. to review the plan one final time, risks and benefits, consent forms. Emily's hand shook as she signed, but her signature was firm. She'd come too far to hesitate now. Pastor Williams appeared in the doorway, still in his coat from the cold November morning. "Thought you could use a prayer?" Even Robert, who hadn't been to church in years, bowed his head. Pastor Williams kept it simple. "Lord, grant Emily courage, guide the surgeon's hands, bring her safely home to those who love her." "Amen, amen," they echoed. David rushed in. Moments later, visitor rules bent by a sympathetic nurse. His hair was disheveled, eyes wild with worry. "I had to see you before." He pressed a sealed envelope into Margaret's hands. "Give this to her after. When she wakes up, it says what I've been too scared to say." Emily wanted to open it now, but the orderly was already at the door. "Time to go, Miss Mitchell." The final moments compressed into a series of snapshots, Margaret kissing her forehead, whispering, "I love you," Robert squeezing her hand, unable to speak, Sarah arriving with Emily's childhood teddy bear, tucking it beside her on the gurney, David's last look, full of everything unspoken. Then Dorothy arrived. The hospice nurse wheeled her in, oxygen tank rattling. Dorothy's thin frame wrapped in blankets despite the heated hospital. She was dying. Everyone could see it, but she'd used her last reserves of strength to be here. Dorothy took Emily's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "See you on the other side, sweetheart." She removed the small silver cross from around her own neck and clasped it around Emily's. "For courage. You've always had it. This just reminds you." The orderlies couldn't wait any longer. Surgery schedules were precise. Emily was wheeled down the long corridor, fluorescent lights passing overhead like a countdown. She looked back once, her family waving, Dorothy blowing a kiss, David with his hand pressed against his heart. The operating room doors swung closed. Inside, the room was blindingly bright. Cold metal tables, masked faces, instruments laid out with surgical precision. Dr. Cooper stood at the scrub sink visible through a window, methodically washing his hands. Nurse Rebecca Stevens adjusted the monitoring equipment. She had specifically requested to be on this surgery. Something about Emily's case called to her a pull she couldn't quite name. "Let's get you positioned, Emily," she said gently, helping Emily lie flat on the operating table. The anesthesia mask lowered toward her face. Dr. Grant's kind eyes appeared above it. "Count backward from 10 for me. Emily, you're going to do great. 10, 9, 8. Emily's last thought before darkness. "Please let me wake up." In the waiting room, time moved like honey. Robert paced, wearing a path in the already worn carpet. Margaret clutched her rosary borrowed from Mrs. Henderson, though she wasn't Catholic, and barely remembered the prayers. Dorothy dozed in her wheelchair, conserving energy. David and Sarah sat close, not speaking, just being present. Hour 1. And our nurse emerged with an update. Incision made, everything proceeding normally. Hour 2. Silence. The family's anxiety ratcheted higher with each passing minute. Margaret's breathing grew shallow. Robert called his brother for support he rarely asked for. Hour 3, Dr. Cooper appeared in the doorway, still in surgical scrubs, mask pulled down. His face was unreadable. Everyone stood at once. "She's stable," he said immediately, and the collective exhale was audible. "But we found something unusual. Can you come with me?" He led them to a small consultation room. On the table sat a sealed medical specimen container. Inside, preserved in clear fluid, was the dermoid cyst tissue, gray, fatty, about the size of a lemon, and something else. Nestled in the tissue was a small silver ring, tarnished black in places, but unmistakably metal, about the size of a wedding band, delicate, clearly very old. Margaret gasped and grabbed the edge of the table. Dorothy's eyes flew open, suddenly alert, despite her weakness. "What is that?" Robert asked. Dr. Cooper's voice carried genuine wonder. "A ring?" It was completely encased in the cyst tissue. "In 30 years of surgery, I've never seen anything like this." He explained the medical phenomenon. Dermoid cysts formed during fetal development, sometimes absorbing foreign material if the mother was exposed during pregnancy. Theoretically, though he'd only read about it in medical journals, a ring worn during pregnancy could, in extraordinarily rare circumstances, become incorporated into developing fetal cells. "The odds are astronomical," Dr. Cooper said. "This will be a case study in medical literature." Dorothy reached for the container with the trembling hands. Dr. Cooper opened it carefully, extracted the ring with forceps, rinsed it in sterile saline, even tarnished. Intricate engraving was visible on the inner band. Dorothy held it up to the light, tears streaming down her weathered face. Hayes, family, none. She read the inscription, "My great-grandmother's wedding ring, lost 47 years ago." "That's impossible," Margaret whispered. "I wore this ring every day of my pregnancy with you." Dorothy said to Margaret, "The night you were born, the home birth, the complications, I was unconscious for hours. When I woke, it was gone. We searched everywhere." She looked at Emily's sealed ore doors. "It was with her all along, inside her, waiting." The room fell silent as the implications settled. A ring lost in 1908 somehow becoming part of Margaret's cellular structure, passed to Emily during her development, growing encased in a cyst for 22 years. Science couldn't fully explain it, but sitting in that hospital room, the Mitchell family felt something beyond science, a connection across 4 generations, a mysterious thread binding them together through time and flesh and love. "How's Emily?" Margaret finally asked, voice shaking. Surgery was successful, clean margins, facial nerve intact. She'll make a full recovery. De Cooper smiled. "She's one tough young woman." Dorothy clutched the ring, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Thank you." Whether to God or fate or the mysteries of the universe, no one was certain. Emily woke in stages, consciousness returning like the tide, advancing, retreating, advancing again. The recovery room swam into focus through a haze of anesthesia. Bright lights, beeping monitors. The right side of her face wrapped in what felt like 1,000 pounds of gauze. Pain arrived as a dull throb, manageable with the morphine drip, but more than pain, she felt something else, emptiness. The mass that had defined her existence for 13 months was gone. She touched the bandages tentatively, exploring the new contours of her face. A nurse appeared, not Rebecca. Someone else Emily didn't recognize. "Welcome back, sweetheart. Surgery went perfectly. Your family's waiting. Want to see them?" Emily nodded, then winced. Even small movements hurt, but before her parents entered, Dorothy was wheeled in. The hospice nurse had advocated for this 5 minutes. Doctor's orders, be damned. This might be their last chance. "Grandma?" Emily's voice came out slurred, her mouth not quite working right yet. Dorothy's wheelchair came close to the bed. She was barely conscious herself, running on fumes and willpower. In her palm, she held the silver ring, now cleaned, gleaming softly under the fluorescent lights. "It was inside you, baby, waiting to come home." Emily's drugged mind struggled to understand what. Dorothy placed the ring in Emily's hand, closed her granddaughter's fingers around it. 4 generations. This ring has watched over 4 generations of women in our family. Now it's yours to carry. Properly this time. She slipped it onto Emily's white ring finger. It fit perfectly. "I don't understand," Emily whispered. "You don't have to. Some things are mystery, not logic. But know this, you carry blessings inside you that you can't even see. This surgery didn't just remove something, it revealed something." Dorothy's eyes were bright with tears and morphine and approaching death. "I'm so proud of you." "Don't go yet, Grandma. Please, not yet, but soon." Dorothy touched Emily's cheek above the bandages. "Live for both of us now." The nurse wheeled Dorothy away. Emily clutched the ring, confused but comforted. Then her parents entered, and Margaret dissolved into tears at the sight of Emily awake and alive. Robert stood behind his wife, hand on her shoulder, his own eyes wet. "Hi, Mama. Hi, Daddy. Oh, baby. Oh, my baby." Margaret couldn't form coherent words, just kept touching Emily's hand, her arm, reassuring herself that her daughter was real and breathing and here. Over the next hour, the story emerged in pieces. The ring found inside the cyst, the impossible medical phenomenon. Dorothy's lost heirloom traveling through generations in ways science couldn't fully explain. Emily listened, her mind foggy but grasping the essential truth. She'd carried her family's history literally inside her body. The weight of that realization was almost too much. "There's something else," Margaret said softly. She pulled David's letter from her purse. "He asked me to give you this when you woke up." Emily's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. The letter was 2 pages. David's careful handwriting, filling every line. He'd loved her since they were 12. He'd watched her shine, watched her suffer, watched her retreat from the world. He'd never wavered. The Mass didn't change how he saw her. It only revealed her incredible strength. He would wait as long as it took, but he wanted her to know she was loved, completely, unconditionally, forever. "When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'm here. But even if you're never ready, I'll still be grateful I got to know you. You taught me what courage looks like. I love you. I've always loved you. I always will." Emily cried, which hurt her face, which made her cry more. "Can he come in?" David must have been right outside because he appeared within seconds. He looked terrified, hopeful, exhausted all at once. He approached the bed slowly, seeing Emily's bandaged face for the first time. "Hey, Em, you read the letter, every word." She reached for his hand with her left, the one without the IV. "Stay with me while I heal." David's smile broke like sunrise. "I'm not going anywhere." He sat beside her bed, holding her hand, and for the first time in over a year, Emily felt something other than fear. She felt hope. The first 3 days of recovery were difficult but progressing. Emily's fever stayed low, her pain was managed, swelling began to subside. Dr. Cooper visited twice daily, checking her incisions, monitoring for infection, expressing cautious optimism. Then on day 4, her temperature spiked to 102 degrees. Concern rippled through the medical team. Possible infection at the surgical site. They started aggressive IV antibiotics, drew blood cultures, watched her closely. Margaret's worst fears seemed to materialize before her eyes. "It's happening," she whispered to Robert in the hallway. "Just like Linda, it starts with fever. It's not the same," Robert insisted. But his voice lacked conviction. Day 5 brought false relief. The fever broke. Emily ate solid food, smiled at David's jokes, seemed to turn a corner. Day 6. The headache arrived. Sudden, severe, unlike anything Emily had experienced. She vomited from the intensity. Dr. Cooper ordered an immediate CT scan. The results showed a small hematoma near the surgical site, a blood clot that hadn't been there before. Not immediately life-threatening, but concerning. It could resolve on its own, or it could require a second surgery to drain it. We'll monitor it closely. Dr. Cooper explained, if it grows, we'll need to go back in. Emily's morale crashed. She'd been so brave, so strong, and now this. I should have left it alone. She told David that night, I should have just lived with it. Don't say that. You're going to be okay. But Emily had stopped believing in okay. Day 7 brought the worst news of all. The hospice nurse called at 7:43 p.m. Dorothy had died peacefully an hour earlier, pain managed and surrounded by hospice staff singing hymns. Her last words, delivered to Margaret by phone, tell Emily she's free now. Tell her I saw her future. It's beautiful. Margaret relayed the message through her own tears. Emily heard, and something inside her shattered. She'd survived surgery, but her grandmother hadn't survived to see her recovery. The guilt was overwhelming, irrational, but crushing. She waited for me, Emily sobbed. She held on so I could have surgery, and now she's gone because I took too long. She ripped at her bandages before nurses could stop her. They sedated her for her own protection. They said Emily didn't care. She wanted the darkness. The next 48 hours were the darkest of Emily's life. She refused to eat, refused to speak, refused to engage with anyone, even David. The bandages were scheduled to come off in 3 days, but Emily refused that too. What's the point? The hospital psychiatrist diagnosed acute trauma response complicated by grief. Margaret was consumed by guilt for waiting too long, for letting her mother die disappointed, for causing Emily's suffering. Robert collapsed from exhaustion in the cafeteria, a minor stress-induced heart episode that required monitoring. Now, both parents and daughter were hospitalized. The Mitchell family had reached their breaking point. David refused to leave. He slept in the chair beside Emily's bed, holding her hand even when she wouldn't acknowledge him. Sarah organized a prayer vigil at church. 50 people showing up on a Wednesday night to pray for a girl some of them barely knew. Nurse Rebecca came during her off hours. She sat beside Emily's bed and spoke quietly. Emily, you're not honoring your grandmother by giving up. She died knowing you'd live. Don't waste her gift. Emily turned her face away. That night, alone in her hospital room, Emily contemplated pulling out her IV, just disconnecting from everything, the machines, the medications, the hope that kept disappointing her. Her hand reached for the tubing. Then she saw David, asleep in the chair, his hand still holding hers even in sleep. His loyalty, his steadfastness, his refusal to abandon her even when she'd abandoned herself. Sarah had come every day. Her parents, despite their own fears and failures, had fought for her. The entire community had rallied. Dr. Cooper had reduced his fee. Strangers had donated money. People were fighting for her. Maybe, Emily thought, it was time to fight for herself again. Day 10 arrived with winter sunlight streaming through the hospital window. Dr. Cooper entered Emily's room with Nurse Rebecca, both wearing expressions of gentle determination. Emily, the bandages need to come off today. Medical necessity, we need to check for infection and remove the stitches. Emily had avoided this moment, terrified of what she'd see. But the hematoma had stabilized. Her fever was gone. Her body was healing, even if her spirit lagged behind. Can I be alone after? Her voice was small, hoarse from days of minimal speaking. Of course, whatever you need. Margaret and Robert waited outside, giving their daughter this moment of privacy. Dr. Cooper worked slowly, unwinding layers of gauze with practiced hands. Rebecca stood ready with fresh dressings, though she suspected Emily wouldn't want them replaced immediately. The final layer came away. Dr. Cooper and Rebecca exchanged a glance, relief mixed with professional satisfaction. "Emily, open your eyes." "I can't. I don't want to see." "You're stronger than you think," Rebecca said quietly. "You've come so far. Don't stop now." Emily's eyes opened slowly. She looked down first at her hands, at the ring Dorothy had given her, at anything but the mirror Rebecca was holding. "Look," de Cooper said gently, turning her chin. "Look at what you've survived." Emily raised her eyes to the mirror. The surgical scar ran 3 inches along her right cheek, following the natural contour of her face. Red, raised, stitches still visible like tiny black threads. But the massive protrusion was gone. Her face was symmetrical again, swollen, yes, scarred, yes, but recognizably hers. She touched her cheek gently, and sensation flooded back, real feeling, after 13 months of numbness. Her fingers traced the scar, and tears began falling. "It's gone," she whispered. "It's really gone." The mass that had consumed her identity, that had isolated her from the world, that had defined every moment of the past year, removed. In its place, a scar she could learn to live with, a face she could learn to recognize again. "I can feel my face," she said, touching the scar again. "I forgot what that was like." De Cooper smiled. "You're healing beautifully, Emily. The scar will fade significantly over the next year, but yes, it'll always be there." Emily looked at her reflection, really looked, and something shifted inside her. "It's mine. I earned this." The scar wasn't a mark of shame. It was evidence of survival, a badge of honor earned through 13 months of suffering and the courage to finally face it. "You're beautiful," Rebecca said, "and so brave. Your grandmother would be so proud." Dr. Cooper added. The mention of Dorothy brought fresh tears, but different ones, not grief-stricken, but grateful. Dorothy had held on long enough to see Emily make the choice to fight. She died knowing Emily would survive. "Can my parents come in?" The door opened. Margaret and Robert entered hesitantly, prepared for anything: anger, despair, rejection. Instead, Emily turned to face them fully. No bandages, no scarf, nothing hiding the surgical result. Margaret gasped, hands flying to her mouth. Robert froze, unable to speak. "It's okay, Mama," Emily said. "I'm okay." Margaret approached slowly, reached out to touch the scar with trembling fingers. "You're so beautiful, baby. You always were." "Our strong girl," Robert managed, voice breaking. "Our brave, strong girl." They held each other carefully, mindful of stitches and IV lines and the fragility of this moment. Healing, physical and emotional, had finally begun. Later, after her parents left, Emily remembered David's letter. She asked for her mother's purse, found the crumpled envelope she'd read once in an anesthesia fog. This time, she read every word with clear eyes and an open heart. His confession of love, his patience, his unwavering belief in her worth regardless of appearance. "Your face isn't what makes you beautiful. Your heart is," Emily called for the nurse. "Can David come in?" He arrived within minutes. Having been in the waiting room for days, he saw her face uncovered for the first time, swollen, scarred, beautiful in its honesty. "There you are," he said simply, and his smile held no pity, only love. He sat beside her bed, took her hand. "You got my letter?" "I did. Every word." "You don't have to respond. I just needed you to know I love you too." Emily interrupted. "I think I always have. I was just too scared to see it." Their first real kiss was gentle, careful of her healing face, sweet with chicks and promises of tomorrow. Day 12 brought unexpected news from the hospital billing office. Robert and Margaret were called for a meeting, bracing themselves for devastating financial reality despite the fundraising. They'd accepted that debt would follow them for decades. The billing manager, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, laid out the statement. Original cost $127,000 charity care discount, 70% to $88. $900 remaining balance, $38. $100. Then came the surprises. Anonymous donations beyond what they'd tracked, $34,253, the community GoFundMe and fundraisers, $31,850 to Cooper's waived surgical fee, hospital foundation grant, $20,000 awarded because the dermoid cyst with ring was considered a case study worthy of research funding. Regional Medical Research Fund, $15,000. Insurance finally approved after appeal, $3,000 final balance, $3,847. Robert stared at the paper, unable to process. He'd worked 3 jobs, saved $47, 213 prepared to sacrifice everything, and they needed less than $4,000. "This can't be right," he said, voice shaking. "It's right." Patricia confirmed, "Your community really came through, and Emily's case attracted research interest that helped significantly." Robert started crying right there in the billing office. Margaret held him while he sobbed from relief, from exhaustion, from the release of 13 months of crushing pressure. They could pay the balance today, with money left over, enough to help Emily start college, enough to fix their roof, pay off the car, breathe for the first time in over a year. The hospital social worker shared another revelation. The anonymous donations came from dozens of sources. Teachers from Emily's elementary school, former volleyball teammates' families, church members, complete strangers from across the country who'd seen the GoFundMe, and 3 separate donations from Mrs. Henderson, the woman who'd gossiped, then felt convicted, then gave generously to make amends. "Your town loves you," the social worker said. "You just had to let them show it." Margaret understood then. She'd built walls around her family, believing the world was cruel, that they had to face everything alone. But isolation had been her choice, not the community's. When they'd finally been vulnerable enough to ask for help, love had flooded in. "I was so wrong," she told Robert that night, "about everything. The world isn't cruel. I was just too afraid to see its kindness." 4 weeks later, Emily stood in front of the full-length mirror in her childhood bedroom, wearing a yellow bridesmaid dress, Dorothy's favorite color. Her cousin Claire's wedding was, today, the event Dorothy had wanted so desperately to see. The scar was still prominent, red against her pale skin, but makeup lightened it. Emily made a choice she wouldn't hide it completely. She styled her hair back away from her face, letting the scar show. It was part of her story now, part of who she'd become. The church was the same one where 50 people had gathered for a prayer vigil when she'd been at her lowest. Now it was decorated for celebration white ribbons, golden chrysanthemums, joy replacing desperation. Emily walked down the aisle as a bridesmaid, and every face turned to watch. But the expressions weren't pity. They were admiration, perhaps genuine happiness. Sarah walked beside her, both girls crying happy tears. Pastor Williams officiated, and during his sermon, he paused. We gather in celebration today, not just of Claire and Michael's union, but of life itself. Emily Mitchell sits before us as living proof that communities heal when they come together. That courage looks like a young woman who refused to disappear. That beauty comes from surviving, not from perfection. Emily cried openly, not caring about her makeup, not hiding her face, at the reception under a white tent with autumn leaves falling golden around them. David asked Emily to dance, a slow song under string lights. His arms careful around her, her head on his shoulder. You're the most beautiful woman here, he whispered. She touched her scar self-consciously. Even with this, especially with that, it means you bought. It means you won. He kissed her in the middle of the dance floor, and the crowd applauded. Everyone had been rooting for them for her all along. Margaret and Robert danced nearby, closer than they'd been in years. Shared trauma had nearly broken them, but ultimately brought them together. Margaret caught Emily's eye across the dance floor and mouthed, I love you, Emily mouthed back. I love you too. Complete forgiveness, freely given, 8 months later. Spring arrived in Willow Creek with the promise of renewal. Emily enrolled in nursing school at Iowa State. Starting the dream she'd deferred, she excelled immediately, her personal experience giving her uncommon empathy for patients facing medical challenges. She worked part-time as a volunteer at County Hospital, mentored by Nurse Rebecca, who'd become both friend and guide. Their bond had deepened when Rebecca finally revealed she was the anonymous donor, repaying Dorothy's kindness from 20 years earlier when Rebecca's family had been homeless. Your grandmother hired my mother as a housekeeper when we had nothing. She didn't need a housekeeper. She needed to help us without making us feel like charity cases. She saved my family. Let me help save yours. The circle of kindness, completing itself across decades, Robert returned to one job, his health improving without the crushing burden of 3 shifts. The family had Sunday dinners again, real conversations, laughter, the silence that had poisoned them replaced by connection. Margaret saw a therapist, finally processing Linda's death after 27 years of frozen grief. She joined the hospital's family support program, offering comfort to others in waiting rooms, providing the support she wished she'd had. David and Emily made their relationship official. Talk of marriage and future and forever, no longer frightening but exciting. He was studying agriculture at community college, planning to take over his family's farm. They dreamed together now, building a life where scars were honored, not hidden. Emily visited Dorothy's grave every Sunday, bringing yellow flowers. She wore the family ring on her right hand, 4 generations of women connected by love and mystery and survival. The other ring, the one removed from inside her, she donated to the hospital's medical museum. Let other families know miracles happen. Science can't explain everything. Sometimes love fills the gaps. One evening in late spring, Emily stood before a support group at County Hospital, 12 people dealing with facial differences, surgical scars, and the emotional weight of visible trauma. Ages ranged from 8 into 70, all carrying marks of life's battles. Emily showed her scar proudly, no longer hiding behind hair or makeup. "This scar is my story," she told them. "What's yours?" They went around the circle: car accident survivor, burn victim, cancer patient, birth defect, domestic violence survivor, veteran, each person sharing their journey, their pain, their survival. "Society tells us to hide these marks," Emily said. "I say show them. These scars mean we're warriors. We survived what could have destroyed us." A 16-year-old girl with a port wine birthmark covering half her face spoke up. "I've never shown my face without makeup, not once." "Would you like to?" "Here's safe," Emily offered. The girl hesitated, then slowly wiped the makeup away. Purple birthmark revealed, covering her cheek and forehead. The group applauded. The girl cried but smiled, perhaps the first genuine smile she'd allowed herself in years. After the meeting, Nurse Rebecca approached Emily. "You're a natural healer. Ever think about leading this group officially?" "I'm just a student." "You're more than that. You're a survivor who helps others survive. That's the best kind of healer." Emily considered. Maybe this was her calling, not just nursing, but emotional healing too. Helping people carry their scars with dignity instead of shame. Later, she met with Dr. Cooper to discuss mentorship through nursing school. He shared his own story. "I became a surgeon because someone saved my sister. She had a facial tumor. The surgeon who removed it changed her entire life. I wanted to do that for others. That's what I want too," Emily said. "Then you will—" "I see it in you, that rare combination of technical skill and genuine compassion." Walking out of the hospital, with David waiting in the parking lot, Emily looked back at the building where she'd almost given up, where community had saved her, where she'd learned to save herself. "How did it go?" David asked. "I think I found my purpose." "You've always had purpose. You just found your path." They drove toward a future uncertain but unafraid. Emily's hand in David's, the ring catching sunlight, a symbol of generations who'd survived, who'd loved, who'd passed their strength forward. 2 years later, Emily stood in her apartment, graduation cap and gown laid out for tomorrow's ceremony, top of her nursing class. Full scholarship to an advanced program, job offers from 3 hospitals. A diamond ring on her left hand David had proposed last month, and she'd said yes immediately. She opened her journal and wrote, "Dear Grandma, I'm graduating tomorrow. Everything you hoped for me is coming true. David and I are getting married in your church next spring. Yellow flowers everywhere, just like you would have wanted. The tumor wasn't my curse, it was my teacher. It taught me courage, community, compassion. It taught me that asking for help isn't weakness, that scars tell stories worth sharing, that beauty lives in survival, not perfection. I wear your ring every day. The other ring, the impossible one, lives in the medical museum now, teaching medical students that mysteries exist beyond textbooks. I help families now the way hundreds helped us. The blessing circulates. Love multiplies. Thank you for believing when I couldn't. Thank you for the ring that waited 47 years. Thank you for teaching me that truth sets us free. I'm free now. Grandma, flying, happy, whole, And I know you're smiling down. All my love, Emily. She closed the journal and looked at her reflection in the mirror, the scar faded but visible, a reminder of the girl who'd hidden in darkness and the woman who'd chosen light. Tomorrow graduation, next week engagement party, next year wedding. Forever grateful for the journey that had broken her open so love could flood in, Emily smiled at her reflection fully, freely, without shame, and whispered to her grandmother across the distance, between earth and wherever Dorothy watched from, "I made it, we made it. Thank you for not letting me give up." The ring gleamed on her finger, 4 generations of strength, and Emily walked forward into a future she'd earned with every scar. Sometimes the greatest blessings hide beneath what we fear most. Emily's story reminds us that our darkest moments often carry seeds of transformation we cannot see until we walk through the fire. How many of us have built walls around our families, believing we were protecting them, only to realize isolation was the real danger Margaret's fear, born from loss, nearly cost her everything, but when she finally allowed her community to see their struggle, love poured in from unexpected places. This is the truth about human connection. We are never as alone as we believe. The cashier who notices, the neighbor who begs, the stranger who donates, these small acts weave safety nets we don't see until we fall. Emily carried her grandmother's ring inside her body for 22 years, a mystery that defied logic but proved that love transcends what we understand. Her scar became her strength, her isolation transformed into purpose, her suffering into service. We all carry invisible rings, blessings disguised as burdens, waiting to be revealed. The question is, will we have the courage to let others help us discover them? What burden are you carrying alone that your community could help lighten? Have you ever discovered a blessing hidden inside what you thought was a curse? Share your story in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.